Today, I'd like to talk with you about the information that comes on the seed packets when you buy a packet of seeds. We can use this information to plan our gardens and space our plants for the biggest possible yield. The information that we get from seed packets varies depending on where we get our seeds from. Some seed packets, like the ones we buy at a garden center or grocery store, are packaged for retail sale and they're geared to the home gardener. These usually have pretty pictures of the vegetables so you can see what you'll be growing. Other seed packets are geared to people who grow things on a much larger scale, like farmers. The appearance of these seed packets is much less glamorous, but the packet usually contains a ton of useful information. And it's pretty easy to tell which is which, regardless. Either version provides important information that we should take into account before we put plants or seeds out into our garden. Now, each seed packet gives us information on how tall a plant will get, how much space to leave between plants, when seeds can be safely planted outdoors, when you can start seeds indoors if you're able to give them a head start, and how many days until you'll be able to harvest something. Some plants don't like to be transplanted, so you'll have to start those seeds outside. The companies that sell seeds spend a lot of time growing each type of plant in their own test gardens, seeing how their plants grow under different conditions, and then documenting everything so they can give this information to us on the seed packet. It takes a couple of growing seasons for them to generate all this information. This information is there to help us, and we should use it because it'll give us a more productive garden. I'm going to look at two examples of seed packets from two different companies. The first seed packet is a cherry tomato, which I bought from Johnny's Seeds. Tomatoes are a summer crop, which means they need hot weather in order to bear fruit. The front of the seed packet tells us the name of the vegetable, how many seeds there are in the package, the germination rate, and when they were tested, the lot number, the catalog number, and how long it takes to get your first tomato. The packet says 60 days, and that can be deceiving. 60 days means that you can expect to see your first ripe tomato about 60 days after germination. This doesn't include how long it takes for the seeds to germinate. If you look at the information on the back of the seed packet, it's pretty easy to see that Johnny's sells lots of seeds to large-scale commercial growers because they tell you that you need to plant about 667 plants to fill a 1,000-foot-long row. Now, I only need 1 or 2 cherry tomato plants, and that yields enough tomatoes for me, plus there are a ton left over to give away to friends and grandkids. The next section gives us instructions on how to grow tomatoes from seed. They suggest starting seed indoors and transplanting them into the garden when the weather and soil are warm enough and after all danger of frost has passed. They suggest starting seeds indoors 5 to 6 weeks before planting them outdoors, what they call set out, and that they should not be set out until all danger of frost has passed. You can look up the last average frost date for your area on the internet, but for me, it's around May 15th. So if I look in my calendar and go back 6 weeks from May 15th, I should be starting my tomato seeds indoors around April 1st, which is what I do. They want the soil to be warm while the plants germinate, while the seeds germinate. But then you can let them grow indoors without supplemental heat after that. Warming mats are available for these hot weather plants that help with germination, and I found that they help if your growing area tends to cool off a lot at night, like mine does. Next, they tell us how far apart to set the tomato plants when we set them out in the garden. This variety of cherry tomatoes is indeterminate, which means that these plants just don't stop growing. The seed packet tells us to plant these plants 24 to 36 inches apart, so I usually pick a distance right in the middle, about 30 inches, to leave between plants. The seed packet provides advice on the type of nutrients and fertilizers that help the plant grow best and advises us not to add mulch to the top of the soil until the soil has warmed up enough. That's because mulches keep the soil cool and tomatoes need the soil to be warmed up to grow best. Tomatoes need phosphorus, that's the middle number on the fertilizer package, the P in the NPK. But too much nitrogen causes a ton of green growth, but with much lower yields. Now, I experienced this firsthand without realizing what was happening when I used a fertilizer called Miracle Grow on my tomatoes every couple of weeks. Miracle Grow is a high nitrogen fertilizer with 24% nitrogen, 8% phosphorus, and 16% potassium, along with other stuff. In fertilizer language, that's 24, 8, 16. With this fertilizer, the plants and leaves got huge, but my tomatoes were so late in coming in and the yield was low. Later on, I had my soil tested and learned that my soil also had too much nitrogen, which is probably from all the compost I've added. Now I'm working on changing my soil chemistry and the NPK ratios and the fertilizers I use so I get more tomatoes sooner. They talk about pruning and staking, which will be needed because these plants get pretty big and they can't support themselves. They talk about how to harvest, some common diseases and pests, plus how to combat them. So this packet from Johnny's gives us a lot of information on how to best grow cherry tomatoes, even though it's geared to large-scale tomato growers. So let's look at another packet of seeds. This one is a variety of kale that I bought from New England Seed. You can tell already that this seed packet is specifically made for retail sale to the home gardener just by the pretty picture and the price right on the front of the package. The front of the packet tells us the name, the weight of the seeds, not how many seeds, and that the plant is cold hardy, but not much else. The rear of the seed packet tells us that we should start seeds indoors about 6 weeks before the last frost, or that we can directly plant seeds in our garden in the late summer for a fall crop. Seeds should be planted 1/8 of an inch deep, and they'll take 7 to 10 days to germinate. When putting plants out in our garden, they should be spaced about a foot apart. We can start picking leaves as early as 35 days after germination, and the plant will be fully grown after about 62 days. Now in some cases, the seed packets will tell you how deep to plant the seeds. In other cases, they don't. Now if this information is missing, you should plant seeds about 2 to 3 times their diameter deep when seeding. Cover the seed with fine soil, particularly if the seed is tiny, so they don't have to grow around anything to sprout and get out of the ground. And one final word of caution. Please resist the temptation to put your plants closer together than they recommend. I have to confess that I'm always tempted to try to squeeze a few extra plants into my garden because the plants are small when we first set them out. Now these plants will look fine when you first stick them in the ground, but as the summer progresses, they're going to start growing into each other and competing with each other, and you'll end up with a smaller yield than you would otherwise. There may be other negative side effects, like attracting too many bugs because you have too much of the same smell in one place, and you definitely don't want to have to deal with that.